Hey guys, Mr. G here. In this video, we're just going to take a look at a quick test review on graphing tangent of x. All right, so let's get started with the first one. So for the first one, we're going to graph y equals to 3 tan of x plus 90 minus 2. Now what I'm going to do, I'm going to label all my numbers for A, B, C, and D. So if we take a look, we see that 3 is in the same spot as A. B, we see that there is no number in front of x, so the coefficient is going to be 1. There is a 90 in the same spot as C. However, we see that the negative changed it to a positive, so that means that C has to be a negative number, so the 90 is going to be a negative. And then for D, we have minus 2. All right, so I found all my 4 numbers. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to find all of these 4 pieces of information, starting off with the period. So with the period, I'm going to take 180, divide that by B, which is 1, and I still get 180. Now to get the quarters, meaning how do we get from one x to the next, I'm going to take the period, which is 180, divide that by 4, and I should get 45 degrees. All right. And then the next thing we have is the phase shift. So I'm going to draw the phase, write the phase shift over here. So I take negative 90, divide that by B, which is 1, and I still get negative 90. So that means that since the 90 is a negative, I'm going to go to the left direction since left is the negative side. So 90 units to the left. Okay. And then we see we have D, which is the vertical shift. So that means that for majority of the Y values, I'm going down negative 2. All right, I'm going down. All right, yeah, I'm going down negative 2. So, all right, so we're gonna try to figure out the important Y values. So for tangents, we don't have a maximum nor a minimum values because the graph for the tangents keep going. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to figure out the important Y value. So I have the mid, the low, the high, and the low. So instead of calling it max, mid, min, we're going to call it low, mid, high, mid, low. All right, so at mid is always my value for D, which in this case is negative 2. So for my mid, we have Y equals to negative 2. For high, I have negative 2 and 3. So for that one, I'm gonna take negative 2, add it to 3, and I get positive 1. And then for the low, I have negative 2 minus 3, which is gonna give me negative 5. All right, so let me write that over here. So for the mid, Y equals to D. For the high, we have Y equals to D plus A. For low, we have Y equals to D minus A. All right, so let's keep going. So now I'm gonna go ahead and make my graph. I'm gonna use another color. All right, so let me see. Draw right over in the middle. Okay, so usually with the graph, we always start at 0, 0. However, we do have a phase shift going 90 units to the left. So that means that my starting point is going to be negative 90. All right. And then we have, let's see, 1 is the max, negative 1, negative 2, negative 3, negative 4, negative 5. 1 is the high, 2 is the mid, negative 2 to be exact, and then negative 5 is the low. Okay, so usually we would start at 0, 0 for tangent, which would be the mid, but now we're going to be starting at 90, negative 2. All right, and now I'm going to figure out the rest of my x values. So remember, the quarter is going 45 units. So if I were to go 45 units from negative 90 on the right side, I would end up with, let's see, negative 90 plus 45. I get negative 45. All right, so negative 45, that's going to be my high point. And then if I were to go on the left side of negative 90, I should get negative 135, and that's gonna be my low point, which is that negative 5. So I have my first tangent, which a pattern is always going low, mid, high, and then the next x value after the high is going to be my asymptote. So if I were to add negative 45 to 45, I would get 0. So one of the asymptotes is going to be at 0. Okay, so let's keep going. So now we go from 0 to 45. That's going to be my low point. And then 45 to 90. That's going to be my midpoint. And then 90 to 135, that's my high point. And then 135 to 180, that's going to be my asymptote. At 180, connect the points. All right, so then for the last one, we have, what's it called? So from 180, we have 225, that's the low. 270, that's the mid. And 315, that's the high. All right, and then the number after 315, which is 360, is going to be the asymptote. All right, now if you recall about tangents, the pattern for every tangent graph would be low, mid, high, asymptote. Low, mid, high, asymptote. All right. So let's move on to the next problem. So for number 2, we got to figure out what is a period for this specific tan function. Y equals the tan of 1/2 x. So what I'm going to do to figure out the period, you just take 180, divide that by 1/2, and since I'm dividing a whole number by a fraction, I'm going to do the keep, change, flip. Keep this, change this into division into a multiplication, and flip the fraction. So I have 180 times 2. Multiply those two, I get 360. So the period for this one would be 360. All right. So then we have number 3. Number 3, what is the distance between each point? So we have y equals the tan of 2x. Now, when asking for distance, they're referencing quarters because quarters represent how far do we go from one x value to the next. All right. So to figure out to calculate the quarters, we first got to figure out the period. So I'm going to figure out the period for this graph. We have 180 divided by b, and if we take a look, 2 is in the same spot as b. I end up with 90. So then I can figure out the quarters. So with that, I'm going to take 90 and divide that by 4, and I'm going to end up with 45. So the quarters is the distance between each point is going to be 45 degrees. Okay? All right, so for the last question, we're given a graph and we just want to figure out 2 very specific things. What is the phase shift and what is the period? So if we take a look, we see that we are given a graph over here. And originally we would start at 0, 0, and then we would move on to 45, 1. However, if we take a look, we see that the graph is moved to the right direction because instead of going from 0, 0, we go to 45, looks like a 0.5, and we have 90, 1. All right. So we see on this graph, we see that 90 is the midpoint because this is the low and then this is the high. And then if we take a look, we see that 180 is the asymptote. So if we take a look at the phase shift from 0, 0, which is always the midpoint, we went from that to 90, 1. So the phase shift is going to be 90 units to the right. And then if we wanted to take a look at what was the vertical shift for this one, we went from 0, 0 to 90, 1. So that means that the vertical shift would have been 1 unit up. So vertical shift would be 1 unit. 1 unit up. So now let's take a look at the period. So if we take a look, we see that we take a look at the graphs, the 3 graphs. On the left side, we see that the graph continues to increase, but it looks like it's never touching the the y-axis, which is x equals to 0. And then over here, we see that the graph never touches 180 degrees. So that means that the period would be 180 degrees. All right. And then if we take a look, we see that from 180 to 360, the graph never touches in between those two numbers. And if we were to subtract those two, we would still end up with 180. All right.